The streets of Prague were shrouded in mist, curling around the Gothic towers and ancient bridges as if the city itself exhaled centuries of secrets with every stone. The Vltava River murmured below Charles Bridge, its waters reflecting the gold of street lamps in liquid, trembling lines. A drizzle fell, soft as sighs, and Aarav Sen drew his coat tighter around him, the damp air carrying the faint scent of rain, wet cobblestones, and roasted chestnuts from a nearby vendor. He was far from home, yet he felt a pull, an unnameable certainty that something awaited him. In his satchel lay a single envelope, unmarked except for a line of cryptic handwriting. "She holds the key, but her silence is your curse." Aarav had read the line over and over during his flight from Kolkata. It had haunted him, even as he tried to dismiss it as a prank or a misdirect. But now, standing in the heart of Prague, he couldn't shake the sense that fate had delivered him to this city. He stepped into the Prague Museum of Renaissance Art, the grand hall alive with murmurs, laughter, and the delicate clink of glasses. Chandeliers cast warm, dappled light across the polished marble floors. Scholars and curators, dressed in formal black and grey, moved in measured steps, discussing papers, portfolios, and acquisitions in voices that barely rose above a whisper. And then he saw her. A woman, tall and elegant, stood before a small canvas at the far end of the hall. Her hair, the colour of dark honey, was tied loosely at the nape of her neck. She wore a black gown, simple but perfectly tailored, its fabric catching the light with subtle sheen. She studied the painting with quiet reverence, her gloved fingers brushing the frame with such delicacy that Aarav felt he was witnessing a ritual rather than mere admiration. The painting itself, the whisper code, seemed to hum in the light. The veiled woman depicted had eyes that seemed to hold secrets of centuries, a faint, knowing smile, and subtle geometric patterns hidden beneath layers of oil paint. Aarav's breath caught. He approached, careful not to disturb her, yet unable to turn away. "It's strange," he said softly, more to himself than anyone, "how something can hide in plain sight for centuries." The woman turned, her eyes meeting his. They were grey, deep, and fathomless, as though she could see not only him, but the thoughts he had yet to form. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Then she smiled, faint and enigmatic.
"Or perhaps,"
she said, voice low and melodic,
"it was never hiding. We simply weren't looking in the right light."
Aarav felt the words like a spark in his mind. He introduced himself, Aarav Sen. "I study patterns in art."
"I'm Liana Varakova,"
she replied, her accent a soft, musical lilt that hinted at somewhere Mediterranean.
"And you, Aarav Sen, see what others cannot."
They stood in silence, drawn to the painting as though it were a beacon. Aarav traced the faint patterns beneath the veil. Subtle spirals, hidden sigils, and geometric traces barely visible to the eye.
"You understand art?"
Liana said softly.
"Because you know it is more than what is visible."
And then, as if summoned by some unseen authority, she excused herself. A tall man in a black suit whispered something in Czech, and she nodded, gliding away with an elegance that seemed rehearsed, yet wholly natural. Aarav remained, staring at the painting. He noticed something in the lower corner, faintly etched, almost imperceptible. LS. His pulse quickened. Back at his hotel, he placed the envelope on the desk and stared at it for long minutes. The handwriting seemed familiar, and yet foreign. He opened his laptop and scoured archives, auction records, and private collections. The whisper code did not exist in any of them. And then a message appeared, blinking on his screen from an encrypted sender. "You were right. There is a map beneath the veil. Find me before they do the sender's name." Liana.S. Aarav's chest tightened. Somewhere in Prague, amidst the fog and rain, history was awakening. And he, an art historian from Kolkata, had been pulled into its center. He could feel it. A story centuries old had begun its journey again, and he was already entangled in its threads. Sleep eluded him that night. Outside, the mist thickened over the city, and the distant chimes of St. Vitus Cathedral echoed across rooftops, slow and deliberate like a heartbeat. His mind replayed the gallery, Liana's eyes, the faint sigils beneath the veil. And somewhere deep in that mist, the first shadow of danger stirred. The next morning, Prague was pale beneath a fragile sun that struggled to pierce the lingering mist. Aarav walked through cobblestone streets toward Café Letna, the faint aroma of roasted coffee and fresh pastries mingling with the dampness in the air. He carried the envelope Liana had left him the night before, its weight feeling heavier than mere paper, as though it contained a fragment of the world itself. Liana was already there, seated by a window overlooking the Vltava. She had removed her gloves, revealing delicate hands that seemed almost too fragile to hold secrets. The light struck her hair in streaks of amber and gold, and for a moment, Aarav forgot the urgency that had brought him here.
You look like you didn't sleep,
she said, her voice low, almost teasing. I barely did, he replied, lowering himself into the chair opposite her. I kept seeing the painting. And the letters, her gaze followed his, steady and unreadable.
Did you find the pattern?
Aarav opened his laptop, placing photographs of the whisper code beneath an infrared scan he had prepared. Lines of hidden geometry glimmered faintly on the screen. Spirals, intersecting triangles, a faint trace of Sanskrit numerals at the corner of the veil. They're coordinates, he said finally, pointing at the pattern. Or perhaps a map. Look at this sequence. 24 petals. It mirrors the chakra of time in Bengal temples. Liana leaned closer, her breath brushing his arm.
So it's not just a painting, it's a message.
Her voice was soft, yet the tremor in it betrayed a rush of emotion Aarav had not expected. Exactly, he said, and whoever hid it must have known it would only be discovered by someone who could read the code. They pored over the images for hours. Light from the cafe fell across their papers, illuminating small gold flecks that Aarav's scanner had picked up beneath the layers of paint. Each fleck, each line, each imperceptible mark felt like the pulse of a heartbeat, centuries old. The door to the cafe opened, letting in a rush of wet air and the click of umbrellas. A man in a dark coat glanced their way, but left without notice. Liana stiffened, and Aarav noticed her eyes flicker to the entrance repeatedly.
They're here,
whispered. Aarav frowned. Who?
The Circle,
she said, her voice barely audible.
They've been watching you since Prague. I didn't want to tell you, not yet.
A shiver ran down Aarav's spine. The Circle? She nodded.
A secret order that spans continents. Governments, museums, private collectors. They are everywhere. They deal in secrets, power, and knowledge that has been hidden for centuries. And they want this painting.
His fingers tightened around his coffee cup. Do they know we're working on it?
They know I've contacted you. They probably expect you to be cautious. But I can't control what they know, Aarav. Not entirely.
A silence fell between them. The rain outside softened to a drizzle, tracing silver rivulets down the glass. Aarav's mind raced. How long had Liana been involved? How much of herself had she hidden? And how much danger had she drawn him into by simply meeting him? Then she reached into her bag and handed him a small envelope. The edges were singed, and the paper carried the faint smell of smoke. Aarav opened it. Inside were photographs of the painting taken under ultraviolet light. In the corner of each, a faint sigil appeared, like a spider's web, etched into the canvas. They're coordinates, Aarav murmured again. And they're layered. One map over another, one code over another. Whoever did this was meticulous. Liana's fingers brushed his as she passed him the envelope. The touch was accidental, yet it sent an electric charge through both of them, a quiet acknowledgement of intimacy that neither dared to name. Aarav looked up from the papers. We'll need to verify this with the temple diagrams in India.
Yes, Bishnupur, terracotta temples. The patterns there will tell us more.
Aarav studied her. Her eyes reflected more than concern. A flicker of something deeper, a vulnerability that mirrored his own growing attachment. They had known each other only a few hours, yet the gravity of shared danger had pulled them together. Before they could speak further, Liana's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, lips pressing into a thin line. Aarav noticed the change in her posture, a subtle tension that made her look suddenly fragile.
They know where we are, and they are patient.
Then we need to move faster, Aarav said, his voice tight with urgency. Liana's gaze lingered on him for a moment.
You know, it's not just the code I worry about.
Then what? Aarav asked.
It's us,
she said, eyes searching his.
If they find us, we can't hide. Not from them, and maybe not from ourselves.
The words hung in the air like a warning, a promise, and a confession all at once. Aarav felt his chest tighten, the line between danger and desire blurred. For the first time since arriving in Prague, he realized that this mission, this code, was no longer just about art or history. It was about trust and betrayal, and a bond that could either protect them or destroy them. They left the cafe together, walking along the river, each step a quiet declaration of unity in the midst of an unseen storm. The city, beautiful and silent under the morning mist, seemed indifferent to the secrets unfolding within it. And somewhere, hidden in shadows, someone watched. The monsoon rains had left Bishnupur lush and green, the earth glistening like wet velvet under a sky the color of steel. Aarav and Liana stepped off the train onto the small station platform, their shoes sinking slightly into puddles that reflected the grey clouds overhead. The scent of wet soil and flowering frangipani mingled with the faint tang of river water, and every gust of wind carried the whisper of history. This place, Aarav murmured, eyes sweeping across the horizon. It's alive. Liana nodded, adjusting her scarf as she scanned the surrounding temples. The terracotta walls, weathered by centuries, were still vivid in their reliefs. Battle scenes, deities, floral motifs, geometric patterns interwoven with hidden sigils. Every surface seemed to pulse with meaning, as if the stones themselves remembered the hands that had carved them.
It's all here,
she said, her voice hushed.
Every pattern, every motif, it's the same as in the painting.
Aarav's heart raced. He had studied the scans of the whisper code endlessly, but seeing the parallels in three-dimensional form carved into centuries-old temples made the hidden patterns tangible and urgent. They made their way through narrow paths between the temples, rainwater dripping from carved eaves, leaving silvery streaks down the walls. Their guide, a stooped man named Ramesh, moved silently ahead, occasionally pausing to point out a detail that might otherwise have gone unnoticed. A spiral, hidden in a lotus, a face etched subtly into the terracotta panels, a sequence of dots forming an ancient cipher. Hours passed, and as the sun broke through the clouds, Aarav and Liana entered a partially collapsed temple that Ramesh had hesitated to show. The entrance was narrow, and the walls inside smelled of earth, mold, and centuries of incense. The floor was uneven, covered in moss and rubble. At the far end, partially buried under fallen bricks, lay a copper plate etched with sigils that mirrored the geometric shapes in the whisper code. Aarav knelt, brushing away the dust and debris with careful fingers. This is it, he whispered. The plate seemed almost to hum beneath his touch, a vibration that ran up his arms, echoing in his chest. Liana knelt beside him, eyes wide as she traced her fingers over the inscriptions.
It's a map,
she breathed.
Coordinates, symbols, layers of code. Whoever created it wanted it to survive.
The rain outside intensified, drumming against the temple roof like a distant drumbeat. The light inside flickered through cracks in the walls, illuminating the copper plate in slivers of gold and green. Aarav's mind raced, connecting the sigils to the ultraviolet scans from Prague. These aren't just coordinates, he said slowly. They're instructions. Steps. A path to something bigger, something hidden. Liana's hand brushed his accidentally as she leaned closer, her eyes meeting his. In that glance, a question passed silently between them. One neither dared to voice. Could they trust each other completely, in a world where even shadows might be watching? Hours passed as they studied the plate, mapping each symbol to the temple reliefs, recording their findings in Aarav's notebook. By the time they emerged, drenched in sweat and rain, the air had cleared, leaving a fragile rainbow stretched across the terracotta spires. They walked in silence for a while, the intensity of discovery leaving space for an unspoken intimacy. Finally, Liana spoke.
Aarav, I've been sent to you.
He stopped mid-step, heart tightening. Sent? What do you mean?
To retrieve the code.
She admitted, voice barely above a whisper.
I was part of them. The circle. I was supposed to guide you, observe you, report back. But
she looked away, rain dripping from her hair.
I couldn't, not after I met you.
Aarav's chest ached. Betrayal and relief collided in a swirl of emotions he could not name. So, you've been lying? She said, stepping closer.
No. I've been trying to protect you. From them. From everything.
He searched her face, looking for any hint of deception, but all he found was fear, and a fragile honesty that mirrored his own vulnerability. The moment stretched, suspended in the rain-drenched temple courtyard, and then, as if on cue, a figure appeared in the shadows. Aarav's heart lurched, a man in a soaked trench coat watching them from the edge of the temple steps. Liana tensed instantly, hand moving toward the small knife she carried.
They followed us,
she whispered. Aarav's pulse quickened. Then we have to move. Now together they fled through the narrow alleys between temples, the rain blurring their movements into ghosts. Behind them, the Watcher melted into the shadows, silent and patient. They reached a secluded inn, wet and exhausted, and shut the door against the storm. Inside, the warmth of the room offered a brief sanctuary. Aarav looked at her, soaked and tired, the copper plate's weight in his bag, a constant reminder of the code they protected. I don't know how much longer we can hide, he admitted.
You don't have to,
Liana said softly. She stepped close, her hand brushing his arm again, lingering, deliberate.
We face it together.
For the first time since their journey began, Aarav allowed himself to believe it. In the heart of danger, in the pulse of secrets centuries old, he felt a fragile tether forming, a bond he could not yet name, but which filled him with a quiet, trembling certainty. Outside, the rain softened to a gentle drizzle. The terracotta temples, silent witnesses to centuries of devotion and secrecy, seemed to breathe with them, as if acknowledging that the code, and the love intertwined with it, had found its first sanctuary. The train from Bishnupur to Kolkata rattled over rain-slicked tracks, each motion sending a subtle shiver through the metal carriage. Outside, the monsoon blurred the countryside into streaks of green and grey. Inside, Aarav sat by the window, notebook open, scanning his research files again and again. The copper plate from Bishnupur rested beside him, wrapped carefully in soft cloth, but it felt impossibly heavy. Across the aisle, Liana leaned back in her seat, her hair damp from the storm and her eyes closed. She rested her head lightly on the wall, fingers brushing the seat beside hers. He had watched her sleep for a moment, tempted to reach out, but hesitation stopped him. Something in the quiet stillness felt fragile, too delicate to disturb. Yet even in the serenity of the carriage, a chill had begun to creep through him. Earlier that morning, while reviewing the encrypted files on his laptop, Aarav had noticed a strange anomaly. His research data, meticulously coded, stored and secured, had been accessed remotely. The connection had originated from Liana's tablet. He had not confronted her immediately, not yet. Instead, he had watched her, heart heavy with disbelief and unease. Now, as the train rocked through the tracks, she stirred, eyes fluttering open. "You didn't sleep," she murmured, voice soft and almost vulnerable. "I had work," Aarav said, though the edge in his tone betrayed the tension coiling within him. "Work never leaves you, does it?" she teased lightly, reaching toward his hand, a shadow of warmth between them. But he pulled his hand back, the distance between them suddenly sharp as glass. She noticed the shift. Her lips pressed into a thin line, eyes narrowing slightly. "What is it?" "I noticed something," Aarav began cautiously, his voice steady, though his pulse quickened. "My encrypted files. They were accessed remotely last night, from your tablet." For a heartbeat, Liana said nothing. Then her eyes flickered, stormlight reflecting in the carriage window. "You shouldn't have looked," she said softly. "That's all you have to say?" His voice rose slightly, though he tried to keep it under control. "You brought me into this. The painting, the code, the danger, and now you—" "I did what I had to," she interrupted, almost pleading. "You have no idea what we're dealing with. The Circle isn't just a secret society. It controls governments, armies, people like us. If I hadn't sent those files, they would have killed us both." Aarav stared at her, disbelief clashing with rising anger. "So you are working for them?" "I was," she whispered, eyes fixed on the rain-smeared window. "Until I met you. Until I couldn't do it anymore." The words were a dagger and a balm at once. Betrayal, relief, confusion, desire. He wanted to believe her, to trust her completely, yet doubt gnawed at him, sharper than the monsoon wind rattling the carriage. "Then why?" he asked finally, voice low, brittle. "Why stay close to me if it wasn't part of the plan?" Her hand moved to his, this time deliberate, desperate. "Because I made a choice," she said, trembling. "Because I couldn't let them. Not you." "Not us." A silence fell between them, heavy and suffocating. The train rattled on, the rhythmic clatter of wheels on tracks echoing like a heartbeat of time. For a long moment, Aarav felt only the storm outside and the fragile pulse of trust and betrayal that tied them together. Then, as if reality could not abide quiet for long, a shadow passed by the window. Aarav noticed it, heart thundering. Another figure, tall, drenched in rain, moving alongside the train. Liana whispered, voice tight. "They've been tracking us since Bishnupur. And now—" She hesitated, swallowing hard. "Now they know where we're going next." Aarav's mind raced. Every instinct screamed danger, every hidden memory of the Circle's threats, their meticulous patience, their unrelenting pursuit, pressed against his chest. "Pack your things," Liana said abruptly, urgency in every syllable. She rose, gathering her coat and bag, eyes scanning the carriage as if the shadows themselves could speak. He obeyed, heart hammering. Together they slipped from the compartment at the next station, disappearing into the rain-slick streets of Kolkata. Every splash of water beneath their shoes felt like a heartbeat of fate, pulling them closer to danger, and to each other. By the time they reached a small, inconspicuous inn near the river, Aarav's thoughts had tumbled into chaos. He barely noticed the monsoon's thunder, the mist rising from the Hooghly, or the faint orange glow of lamps in the distance. Liana led him inside, shutting the door firmly against the storm. They were soaked, exhausted, yet every glance, every brush of fingers, every shared breath carried attention. Fragile, electric. "You kept your secrets," Aarav said finally, voice low. "So did I. And now, I don't know what to trust." Liana moved closer, hand brushing his chest. "You can trust this," she said softly, voice trembling. "Me." Her words, fragile and trembling, carried more weight than any storm. Aarav looked into her eyes, grey, luminous, haunted, and felt the unspoken promise that had drawn him to her from the first moment in Prague. Outside, the monsoon softened to a drizzle. But inside that small inn, hearts pounded in tandem, a fragile tether forged in betrayal, danger, and the quiet certainty of something deeper, unspoken, and inevitable. And somewhere in the dark streets of Kolkata, a message blinked on Liana's phone. "You've gone too far. Retrieve the code, or you both die." The threat was distant, yet immediate, and in that tense pause, Aarav realized the stakes had never been higher. Love, trust, and survival now intertwined with a force neither could ignore. And the circle was always watching. The monsoon had transformed Kolkata into a labyrinth of rain-slicked streets, canals overflowing with brown water that carried the scent of earth and decay. Aarav and Liana moved silently through the city, each step measured, each glance vigilant. The copper plate from Bishnupur rested securely in Aarav's satchel, its weight a constant reminder that centuries of secrets and danger now rested in their hands. Liana led him through narrow alleyways, past shuttered shops and flickering street lamps, to a warehouse by the edge of the Hooghly River. Its exterior was weathered, bricks blackened by time, windows boarded, yet it radiated a presence of careful concealment. "This is it," she whispered, voice tight with anticipation. "The entrance to the archive." Aarav studied the structure, noting the faint carvings in the doorway. Geometric sigils, echoes of the patterns they had traced in the painting and the temples. "How long has it been here?" he asked. "Centuries," Liana said. "It has survived floods, storms, even the neglect of men who didn't know its purpose. Only the circle has always known where to find it." The heavy trapdoor at the side of the warehouse groaned as Liana pushed it open. Damp air, thick with the scent of earth and mold, greeted them. The wooden steps beneath their feet were slick, coated in algae and the residue of years of neglect. Aarav's pulse quickened. Danger felt immediate, even before they descended. At the bottom of the staircase lay the archive, a vaulted chamber of stone, lined with shelves containing ancient manuscripts, copper plates, and paintings that had survived centuries of secrecy. The faint glow of a single oil lamp illuminated the center of the room, revealing a small table with maps and coded letters arranged as though waiting for their arrival. "It's magnificent," Aarav breathed, stepping closer. Each artifact seemed alive with history, each mark and sigil vibrating with the echo of knowledge long hidden. Liana knelt beside a copper plate, brushing away decades of dust. "Everything the circle has ever hidden is here," she whispered. "Art, manuscripts, codes, all connected. And this," she said, pointing to a folded map, "leads to the final location of the Whisper Code." Aarav unfolded the brittle map, eyes scanning the meticulous annotations. "Coordinates," he murmured, "and instructions. They're layered, like a cipher within a cipher. Whoever created this wanted it protected at all costs. They worked for hours in silence, the rain outside a constant companion, until a subtle movement caught Aarav's eye. Shadows flickered along the walls. He froze, hand instinctively reaching for Liana's.
"They found us,"
she whispered, tone taut with fear. Aarav felt his pulse spike. "We need to leave, now." But even as they moved toward the exit, a mechanism activated beneath the table. A panel slid open, revealing a small chest containing letters, maps, and a key, its purpose clear only to those who could decipher the code. Aarav lifted the chest carefully, feeling the weight of centuries pressing against his fingers. "This is it," he said, voice barely audible. "The key!" All of it, Liana's eyes met his.
"We did it,"
she whispered, relief and awe mingling in her tone. But the moment was brief. Footsteps echoed from above, deliberate, measured, and unyielding. "They're close," Aarav said, heart hammering. The circle had tracked them across continents. Now they had arrived. In a flurry, they gathered the chest, maps, and copper plates, moving silently through the chamber. The shadows above the stairs grew, and Aarav's mind raced for a plan. "There's a service tunnel," he said. "It leads to the river." "We can escape undetected," Liana's hand pressed against his back as they descended the hidden passage. The tunnel smelled of wet stone and history, the faint trickle of water beneath their feet echoing like a heartbeat. Every step was a test of trust, every breath a reminder of the danger surrounding them. At the riverbank, the floodwaters had risen, carrying debris in the current. Aarav and Liana clambered into a small wooden boat, shoving off into the murky water. The city's lights reflected in the rippling surface, fragmented and distorted, mirroring the chaos of their lives. For a moment, they allowed themselves to breathe. Liana's fingers brushed Aarav's as she steadied the boat.
"We survived,"
she whispered. He met her gaze, feeling the weight of her confession, her choices, the loyalty and love that had emerged despite betrayal. "We did," he replied, and then softly, "Together." The boat drifted down the Hooghly, carrying them away from the archive, away from immediate danger, yet deeper into the web of secrets they had uncovered. Their hands found each other, fingers entwined, a fragile tether of trust and desire that neither dared to sever. As the river swallowed them into the night, Aarav realized the full extent of their journey. The archive beneath the river had given them knowledge, but it had also bound them together, in fear, in hope, and in a love tempered by the shadows of history. Above, the city slept unaware, but below the water, beneath the stones and ink, the heart of the conspiracy pulsed, waiting. And somewhere in the distance, the circle had already begun its next move. Vienna was a city of secrets, as Aarav and Liana discovered as soon as they arrived. Its streets were a blend of Baroque grandeur and shadowed alleys, cobblestones polished by centuries of history. The air carried the faint scent of roasted chestnuts, rain, and old stone. But beneath its elegance, the city thrummed with quiet danger. Every reflection in the glassed windows, every flicker of shadow in the corner of an alley, seemed to watch them. They had arrived at a safe house once belonging to a European branch of the Circle, hidden behind the facade of a forgotten townhouse in the historic centre. The door, heavy and scarred, opened onto a narrow hallway lined with mirrors. The reflections multiplied endlessly, creating a labyrinth of images that made Aarav feel disoriented, as though reality itself had fractured. "This place," Liana murmured, "was designed to confuse. To make you see too many versions of yourself until you doubt which one is real." Aarav ran his fingers along the wall, touching the mirrors, noting subtle scratches and hidden hinges. "A trap," he said quietly. "Or a test." Liana stepped closer, her hand brushing his. "And yet, it brought us here, to the heart of the circle." They moved cautiously, mirrors reflecting every movement, every gesture, until they entered a library at the back of the house. Tall shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, laden with books, manuscripts, and ancient maps. Each artifact was meticulously catalogued, every shelf labeled in code. On a central table lay an array of objects, sketches, encrypted letters, and documents detailing the Circle's centuries-long operations. Aarav examined them with awe. "They've manipulated everything, art, politics, trade, even religion, to maintain control. And all of it, centered on hidden knowledge, codified in these works." Liana pointed to a document showing the European connections. The whisper code was never just a map. It's a key to influence, to power. Whoever holds it can direct history itself. The enormity of it pressed upon them. In that room, surrounded by centuries of ambition, deceit, and genius, Aarav realized how small they were, yet how vital their choices had become. Suddenly the sound of the door clicking made them tense. They weren't alone. Shadows flickered in the mirrored corridors outside. Aarav instinctively moved in front of Liana, scanning every reflection. A man stepped from the shadows, impeccably dressed, his eyes sharp, calculating. He was older, elegant, yet there was a chill in his presence, unspoken menace. "You've come far," he said smoothly. "Farther than I anticipated." Liana's fingers tightened around Aarav's arm. "We're not afraid of you," she said firmly, though her voice betrayed tension. The man smiled faintly. "Fear isn't required. Control is—" He gestured to the documents on the table. "You have the key, yes, but do you understand what it opens? And at what cost?" Aarav's heart pounded. This was the leader of the circle, the culmination of their pursuit. Every instinct screamed danger, yet he knew confrontation would be cerebral, not violent. Words and choices here mattered more than fists. "We understand enough to know that knowledge belongs to no one," Aarav said steadily. "And we will protect it." The man's gaze lingered on Liana. "And yet you stand here together. Trust is fragile, isn't it?" Liana pressed closer to Aarav. "It's stronger than you think." For a tense moment, silence filled the room, broken only by the distant hum of the city. Then the man's expression shifted, a mixture of frustration and resignation. "Perhaps you are more formidable than I imagined," he said. "You cannot be stopped without risking exposure. Perhaps there is a place for you outside the circle after all." Relief flooded Aarav and Liana. The confrontation, intense as it had been, ended not in violence, but in recognition of their resolve. They remained in Vienna for several days, studying the documents, tracing the circle's influence across centuries, and planning their next steps. Every glance between them carried layers of unspoken trust and burgeoning love forged in shared danger. One evening, atop a rooftop overlooking the Danube, the city bathed in twilight. Liana pressed her hand to Aarav's chest. "We've found the heart," she said softly. "But now we must decide what to do with it." Aarav drew her closer. "Whatever we choose, we do it together. Always, the river below reflected the fading sunlight, the city's lights beginning to flicker on. In that moment, all danger, all secrets, and all conspiracies seemed distant. Yet they both knew the circle's reach was far. The game was not over. But for the first time since Prague, Aarav allowed himself to hope. Hope in knowledge, hope in survival, hope in Liana. And somewhere in the mirrored corridors of Vienna, the circle's agents watched, already calculating their next move, unaware that the bond forged in shared danger had become their greatest vulnerability. The morning in Vienna was pale, the sunlight slanting through the high windows of the townhouse, catching dust motes in the air like fragments of gold. Aarav and Liana moved quietly, their footsteps softened by the thick carpet, hearts still racing from the previous night's discoveries. They had spent hours tracing the circle's influence through centuries of art, politics, and secret codes, until the weight of history pressed upon them like a living thing. "It's all here," Aarav murmured, brushing his fingers over a manuscript detailing a lineage of secrets stretching from Prague to Bishnupur to Venice. The circle's power, its reach, everything they've hidden. Liana nodded, eyes scanning the ancient documents.
And yet, even after all this, they never anticipated one thing: that we'd see it for ourselves and choose differently.
Aarav looked at her, tracing the curve of her jaw, the sharp light in her eyes, and the vulnerability she tried to hide. For a heartbeat, the world outside ceased to exist. "We've risked everything," he said softly, "and yet I've never felt more alive, or more certain of anything in my life." Her gaze softened, and she reached for his hand, intertwining her fingers with his.
And yet this is just the beginning,
she whispered.
The knowledge we now carry, it's a responsibility as much as it is power.
They worked through the morning, piecing together the final instructions encoded within the whisper code, the copper plates, and the terracotta temples. Each discovery revealed not only hidden locations, but also the philosophical truths that the circle had safeguarded. Lessons about balance, ethics, and the consequences of wielding knowledge without conscience. By late afternoon, they had traced the final coordinates to a small, forgotten abbey on the outskirts of the city, abandoned centuries ago but preserved beneath layers of secrecy. The abbey sat quietly in the golden light of late afternoon, its stones glinting with the secrets they had chased for months. "This is it," Liana said, voice hushed. "The culmination of all the codes, the maps, the heart of the conspiracy." Aarav nodded, tightening his grip on the satchel containing the copper plates. "And once we step inside, there's no turning back." They entered the abbey cautiously, the air thick with dust and silence. The interior was vast, its nave stretching into shadow, illuminated only by the filtered sunlight through stained glass windows. Symbols traced into the stone floor mirrored the codes they had followed, the culmination of centuries of secret knowledge. At the center of the nave lay a pedestal, and on it a single object, a small, intricately carved box. The carvings resembled the sigils on the copper plate, and when Aarav lifted it, a faint vibration seemed to pulse through his hands. "This is the key," he whispered. "The final piece." Liana stepped closer, her hand brushing his. "Together?" she asked. "Together," he affirmed. They opened the box, revealing manuscripts, charts, and codices detailing centuries of hidden knowledge, secrets that could shape the world if misused, or enlighten it if guided with wisdom. Aarav and Liana exchanged a glance, a shared understanding passing between them. This knowledge was theirs to protect, to use wisely, and to shield from those who would exploit it. A sudden sound startled them, footsteps echoing through the abbey. Aarav tensed, but it was only an old caretaker, emerging from shadow. "Few have entered here in decades," the man said, his eyes narrowing with suspicion and curiosity. "Few are worthy." Liana smiled faintly, a mixture of triumph and relief. "We are here to preserve it," she said firmly, "not to exploit it." The caretaker studied them for a long moment, then nodded. "Then it is yours to safeguard." They left the abbey as dusk fell, the city bathed in the amber glow of twilight. Aarav and Liana walked along the quiet streets, hands intertwined, the copper plates and manuscripts safely hidden, the circle's reach momentarily at bay. On a bridge overlooking the Danube, Aarav paused, drawing Liana close. "We've survived," he murmured, voice low. "The circle, the betrayals, the secrets. And yet here we are." Liana pressed her forehead to his. "Because we trusted each other," she whispered. "Because even in danger, even in deception, we chose to stand together." Their lips met in a kiss, a quiet, trembling affirmation of everything they had endured and everything they had discovered. Around them, the city moved in oblivion, unaware that history itself had shifted in the hands of two people who chose courage, love, and wisdom over fear and power. The final months were spent cataloguing their discoveries, ensuring the circle could not reclaim them, and slowly, painstakingly, returning to ordinary lives it forever changed. Each glance, each touch, each shared memory was imbued with the knowledge that danger and passion had intertwined their destinies. Aarav, writing in his journal one evening, reflected, "Some stories are not merely told. They are lived. They demand courage, love, and unwavering trust. And in the end, the greatest secret is not the knowledge itself, but the choice to protect it, and the heart that chooses with you." Liana rested beside him, tracing patterns in the dust of his notebook, smiling softly. "And we chose well," she whispered. As the sun set over Vienna, painting the sky in hues of gold and rose, Aarav and Liana stood on the rooftop once more, hands intertwined. The storm of conspiracy had passed, leaving only quiet certainty, shared triumph, and the tender, enduring pulse of love that had blossomed amidst danger. And for the first time in months, they allowed themselves to simply breathe, together, unafraid, and irrevocably bound.
In the echoes of the cold, our hearts entwine through the shadows, through the Every secret, every hidden line brought your heart closer to mine. Through the corridors of time I felt your hand, in whispers only we could understand. Every sigil, every hidden line brought your heart closer to mine. In the echoes of the code, our hearts entwine through the shadows, through the line.
नमस्ते प्यारे दोस्तों, स्वागत है विस्पर्ड मेलोडीज एंड टेल्स में, जहां संगीत और कहानियां एक नई जिंदगी पाती हैं। अगर आपको दिल को छू लेने वाले गीत और मनमोहक कहानियां पसंद हैं तो आप बिल्कुल सही जगह पर हैं। तो जल्दी से सब्सक्राइब बटन दबाएं और बेल आइकन को टैप करें ताकि हर नया गाना और कहानी आप तक सबसे पहले पहुंचे। अगर आपको ये पसंद आया हो तो लाइक बटन दबाना ना भूलें। आपका एक लाइक हमारे लिए बहुत मायने रखता है और हमें और बेहतरीन कंटेंट बनाने के लिए प्रेरित करता है। आपके प्यार और सपोर्ट के लिए धन्यवाद। इसी तरह हमारे साथ बने रहें, सपने देखें, सुरों में खो जाएं और कहानियों की दुनिया में डूब जाएं। मिलते हैं अगले वीडियो में।